All right, we're continuing on the next part of the Room with a View tutorial and walkthrough. Here we're walking through the code lab from Google called Android Room with a View. So now we've gone through here down to step 11, and now we're going to start doing the user interface stuff. And I'm going to go through this rather quickly because, again, this is stuff we haven't necessarily covered in class, some of the stuff yet. We'll be doing it later, so we're just going to do a brief overview of it here. So the first thing we want to do is add an XML layout here. So we're going to create a new layout component and add that. Since we haven't done much with styles yet, I'm going to skip over this style section, and we're just going to add this XML file for our recycle viewer. So our list is going to need its own little layout file, and so again we're going to create that. So again, layout files are in resources layout, so we want to do that, and we're going to create an XML file here. So we're going to go new layout file, and so okay, let's try to get new. Yeah, so again, since I'm right clicking on this layout file, it should have the layout resource file available here for us to do. And again, we can do we can just paste or type in the name here. It's just going to be the recycle view dot underscore item layout file. It's going to be in the layout folder here. So we're just going to say OK here. So that'll create this initial layout file for us. And then we're going to actually just replace it with this code here. So again, here I'm going to switch it to code view and replace it. I'm going to leave in this. I didn't copy that first line in here. Sometimes there's slightly different versions of that, so I left that here. But that's what we're going to set up here for us. So this is it. And so again, it's specifying a style here. So I guess we are gonna, let's go back here and go back up to the styles. So again, it's gonna want us to create a styles.xml file inside values and then define the style for this layout here. So I'm gonna go in the values folder. I'm gonna do a new file here. And then we're just gonna call this styles. And again, we're just going to grab this resource and put it in there. So replace that resource link with this one here. Now it's going to complain about these colors. And I think these might be defined in theme, but so we're just going to add them. There's under resources values, there's a color file with some set colors. So I think it's just expecting us to have some colors in here. So I'm just going to grab these from another program I've had and paste them in here. So this is just defining some colors using some hex values. Again, we're not going to do too much about that, but that should fix this error, and we should have our layout file now working. So our recycle view layout work shouldn't have any errors here. So now we're going to want to use that recycle view layout in our main activity layout here. So again, we're going to go to our main activity main layout file. We're going to switch this. Right now it just has one text view in it. We're going to switch this to code view. And we're going to copy this code into it. So again, it's using a constraint layout here. I'm just going to, we have that constraint layout here. So I'm going to leave that be. I'm just going to take these. So we're adding a recycle view and a floating action button, which is going to be just a little add button to this. So I'm just going to take that middle part and replace this one text view with those stuff. So that's the layout here. Now it's going to want us to, well, let's go through this next part. It's going to want us to create a new vector asset for the plus button to add in here and set this up. So let's just do that quickly, and again, we actually talk about this a little bit later in the class, but in drawables, I can do a new vector asset here, scroll down to vector asset, do that. If I click on the clip art, it should bring up a whole list of ones, and I'm going to click on this add button and do that. It'll put in a name here and everything. I'm just going to say next here and finish, and it'll add that to our drawables here. So they've added that here, and we want to make sure, so in our code here for specifying the floating action bar here, we want to make sure we're specifying that this value here. Now, you can actually do this stuff, and Google tends to do this stuff in code view. You can do it in design view. So if we click, here's our little floating action bar here, down here in the corner. And it doesn't have any icon on it, and so I can go down here and there's a source icon. I can click on that and I can choose the plus. That's this one here. It's hard to see with that background, but that's that one, and it'll add the little plus to it, and that'll change the code so that it should have that drawable setup in here. So that's what they're doing here is with all these steps. It's just adding that little plus to this. We do miss a couple issues here. The dimensions isn't done and the string isn't fixed here, so we'll have to come back and fix that in just a little bit. We'll create a dimensions file, I think, in a later step. So I'm just going to leave this as is for now. I like to have my main activity, then the XML file, and then other files after that, so I keep things organized in my mind. Okay, so that's our view. Now we have to create a view. So to display this list on it, and again, we're not going to do it too much. We're going to have to create a couple classes, 2 classes. So the first one is this view holder. So I'm going to make a new class, view holder here. And again, I'm just going to copy this, and again, we're going to talk about this later, and so I'm just not going to deal too much with this. We're just going to post that in, do our imports that we need here. Our view imported in our view group. Okay. Okay. This is our recycle viewer, so we've done that here, and then we need this list adapter. And again, when we get to recycle views generally always have this. It's amazing how complicated it is just to add these lists of things, but these are complicated lists that will recycle elements, get them as needed and stuff like this, and we have to then map the elements onto the layout files here. So again, I'm just going to copy this and post this in here. Do my import here. Import here. View group, and is there a view that we have to import? Nope. Okay. So again, I'm not going to go into detail about what we're doing here. We'll talk about this at a later date. We'll probably revisit this, but this just sets up our view. One thing we're getting is quite a few classes. One thing that's sometimes done at this point is to create sub folders here and have all the database stuff like the DAO, the repository, the room database, and maybe even the entity in another database, and then all the UI stuff like the view models here. I've also seen large systems where they have like all the entities in the entity folders, and they might have multiple DAOs to access multiple databases, and those are all in their own folders. So, we'll just keep this in one folder for now, just so you know. Okay, so now we created this recycle view. Now we have to go into the main activity and set that up. Here. So inside our main activity here, we do our onCreate. We're going to enable this recycle view here and set that up. So inside the onCreate method, we're going to import create a recycle view variable and set that up for this here. And so again, we're doing a find view ID. This has to match the recycle view stuff in our layout. So again, we modified our layout here so that this is our recycle view is this list of things here. So we're pulling that, we're getting access to that, and then we're tying it to this word adapter we've created, and then we're setting it up so that this code we've added will update the recycle view using this special recycle view layout, and they'll use that to lay out each element in the list for it. Okay, so that's that. Let's do some initial stuff here. We also have to go back and populate the initial database. So this goes back into our word room database. I would have done this somewhere differently. Just created a method to initially populate the database, I think, but they're just doing it here. So again, they're creating this callback method here for this. So we need another method here for this callback. Do some imports. Okay, and then we have to call that callback or set up that callback here. So right above our build, we have to add this callback. So right up here, when we're setting up our database, we add this callback to do this here. So this does help when we change instances or versions of the database to reinitialize it and stuff like that. You can actually change it, so rather than it saying hello, we could add, let's say we have some initial things to do. So maybe this is our list of shopping items. So we want some bread and milk are our default two things. We can do that. We could so again, this is just where we're doing some initialization here. Okay. That's that layout. Okay, now we're going to add a new word activity. If you remember this, we have our main activity. We're going to have to display a separate screen for when we want to add words, and a separate screen is a new activity file here. And so that's what we're going to do next, is add a new activity. So we're going to add some things. First, we're going to add some strings to our string file here. So go to the string files. So that's, again, resources, values, strings here. Add our string names here. Colors, we're going to add our colors. I think I actually added that color already. So again, under values, colors is this button label here that's added for that. And then we're going to add a dimensions file here that we're going to use. And so again, we're going to add a resource file to this, and we're going to select the dimensions qualifiers here. So again, under values here, we're going to add a new values resource file. We're going to call it dimensions, and we're just going to make sure we have dimensions so it's initialized, although we'll see. So that's the initial setup of it here, and we're going to specify some dimensions here that we'll use a small padding and some big padding. Android's good at breaking up a lot of the constant stuff into separate files. I mean, some of this makes sense. So if you want to do different languages, do localization to localize this to different languages here, you can just swap out the strings, and there's a whole method of defining multiple strings with certain naming conventions for that. So it's done. Colors, so you can change some of these styles here. So just, but it does seem kind of cumbersome at times to have all these files. Okay. So we've got that set up. Now we're actually going to add our new activity. So we're going to create a new word activity. When you create a new word activity, you do have to be a little careful because we have to add some stuff to what is called a manifest here. So you can't just do new class. You want to do new activity, and we're going to do an empty activity here. New activity empty. We're going to change it to a new word activity here. Everything else is good, and add that. So that'll add this and sync this up for us for this. And so it says make sure you check the Android manifest, and again, it should have added that already. So this is a special file that saves some of the settings here and has a list of all the activities here. This is the main activity and has some special settings because it's the default to run, and then it added this new word activity. So that should be done as long as we did this, created a new activity, not a new class. That'll be set for us. Okay, so that's already there. It'll also create a layout file. It should automatically to go with the activity. So we have a new layout here, a new word layout file. And again, we're going to want to modify that. And I'm just going to take this. They're using a linear layout instead of a constraint layout, which is an old layout that just stacks things together. So I'm just going to go here. I'm going to leave this XML here at the top and delete everything else. So everything, the constraint layout is going to be replaced by this linear layout as we go. So that's this layout file. Now this should be using this dimension folder that we have here, that we have set up here. I'm not sure why it's not. So I'm going to create this resource in that file, and I'm just going to have it called minimum height. And let's go look at the dimension file and see. Oh, I guess it wasn't in here. So we want to set its value. Let's see. Okay, so we're going to set the minimum height to 48 pixels for that size. So now hopefully we've got this new activity layout working in design mode, and then we're going to go back here. Let's see, I think we were at we created the new word activity, but we didn't have the code here. So we're going to grab this code here and paste it in here. So we have a new word activity. It was empty. We're going to paste in. So what's in this code? So we need our string here for our reply, and we need the word we're actually getting from the context, our edit text field. We tie our edit text field into this, and we grab our run button, click, assuming that the field is not empty. We grab the word, we get the text, convert to a string, and then we send it back to our class. So this should be our end of our new word activity. Now we just have to connect that up with our main activity. So in the main activity, remember, our main activity's got to have access to our word view. So in our main activity, we want to declare a word view model here. We want to initialize this with this kind of like a factory or provider here. So that's what they're, so we're declaring that variable here, and then we're initializing it. So we'll initialize that inside onCreate here and do it relatively early. We'll be using this view model and some of the latest stuff, so you can do it relatively early here. Then we're going to want to add this observer so that when words are changed on the live data, remember this is live data, when this live data is changed, we'll get a notification back here. So that's what this code does, is set up this observer here. So we've set up this observer, and this observer is, set up, let's see, set up observer for the live data. Okay. And then we need to have a request code when we start our main activity. Our new word activity, whenever we click the add button, remember there's this layout here. Let's see. It'll just list the words, and when we hit the plus button in our floating action bar, that will add a word, and that'll then we want to call our new word activity. So we want to make sure our floating action bar is set up so that when we have our on click for that, we start our new word activity. We send a code to that. That's what this is defined here. And then when that returns, we get this code here. Now, this is deprecated, it's crossed out, but it still works, and we'll talk about the correct way to do this in a future unit when we do that. So we declare that, we set up our activity to get a result here, or to process the result when it comes back, and then when our floating action bar is clicked, we actually we actually call that new activity. So this stuff here and here is just calling when the floating action bar is is pressed, going to the new activity, and then this is a run when we get back from the new activity and we check if we got our code word okay, and if so, then we add that to the view model here. Okay, so that's this also uses toast again, which is this just pops up a message that says what's going on with this. So that's the general layout. So when we run this, we'll get a list of words. Initially, it'll just be our initial words of bread and milk that are done. And then if we add words, that'll show up and we added to the database, and we can add a new word. So maybe we need some ice cream. Save that word here, and I'll add it to our list. And then again, this is stored in the database, so if we quit this, if we stop this, and then run it again, it will remember our database. All this stuff is stored in the database, and it'll remember those words. Now, right now, we don't have any way of deleting these words from our data. We can only add them to it. So that's something you'd have to add in the future for this, but it runs, gives a basic running here.